My parents left me a broken cabin. My brother got $1.2 million mansion. The day we gathered in the lawyer's office, Anchorage felt colder than usual. Not because of the weather, the cold was inside me. Curtis arrived late, strolling in with his sunglasses still on, and a smirk like he already knew the ending. I sat stiff in my chair, clutching the brim of my father's old cap, trying not to shake. Gunnar Holmes, our parents' lawyer, adjusted his glasses and began. To our youngest son, Curtis Nanook, he read. We leave the beachfront mansion in Miami, valued at over $1.2 million, along with liquid assets, cash, stocks, and several bank accounts. Curtis's smile widened. He leaned back like he was settling into a throne. Gunnar turned the page. To our eldest son, Francis Nanook, we leave the family cabin near Fairbanks, Alaska. Silence pressed in from every wall. That was it. Curtis with the mansion and millions. Me with a rotting shack in the woods. Curtis chuckled. Well, bro, guess mom and dad always knew I was the city type. You? Perfect fit for the forest. I wanted to answer, but my throat locked. The cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was every cold night I survived as a child. Every lesson my father drilled into me. Every song my mother hummed when bread rose in the oven. But to the world, it was nothing. I walked out without a word. The Anchorage wind hit my face like knives. Amber waited outside, arms folded. She rushed to me. Francis, what did they leave you? A cabin, I said, her brow furrowed. And? That's it? Her lips parted, then closed. Curtis? Mansion and everything else. She sighed, fog spilling into the air. Of course, we drove home in silence. I stared out the window at the mountains, feeling them watch me like judges. At my apartment, Amber spun on me. Francis, this doesn't make sense. Your parents, they loved you? They did, I said quietly. Then why leave you scraps? Her voice cracked. Curtis gets $1 million estate and you get firewood? I bristled. It's where I grew up. That's the problem, she shot back. You cling to that old life. Curtis lives big and you... She gestured at the peeling paint on our walls. You live small. Her words sank into me like ice water. I wanted to argue, to tell her ambition isn't measured in money or cars, but she wasn't finished. Maybe this is your chance to sell it. Move somewhere real. Build something better than this. She touched my jacket like it was a symbol of everything she hated. That night, I barely slept. The lawyer's voice echoed in my head. Mansion, stocks, accounts, cabin, cabin, cabin. The next day at my mother's diner, Amber slammed the engagement ring onto the counter, the same ring I'd worked a year of double shifts to afford. I can't do this, she whispered. I need a man who can keep up. I stared at the ring, then at her. Outside, Curtis's silver car idled. He leaned on the hood, sunglasses flashing. So that's it, I said. I'm sorry, she murmured and walked out. The bell above the diner door chimed like a cruel joke. That night, I lay on the floor instead of the bed. The ceiling above me looked like a stranger. My parents were gone. My fiancé was gone. My brother had won it all. All I had left was a sagging roof in the middle of the forest. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I didn't see the mansion. I saw the cabin door, swollen from decades of weather, waiting. It felt less like punishment, more like a summons. By morning, my decision was made. I packed my father's knife, his cap, a thermos, and the ring box I couldn't throw away. I locked the apartment door and didn't look back. The road north stretched like a scar through snow and pine. Mountains hunched against the sky. My hand steadied on the wheel. Behind me, betrayal, money, a woman who chose glitter. Ahead, a broken cabin, and maybe answers. Ask yourself, if your whole life collapsed into splinters and silence, would you chase the mansion? Or would you drive into the wilderness to face what was left of your past? The closer I drove toward Fairbanks, the louder the memories became. Every curve of the highway felt like a thread pulling me back to a childhood I'd both hated and loved. Before Curtis was born, before money softened the edges of our lives, there was just me, my parents, and that old wooden cabin. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof. In winter, snow slid through cracks in the boards and pooled on the floor in patches I had to mop up before they froze solid. The attic was my room, if you could call it that. A corner tucked under the sloping roof where my breath crystallized on the beams above me at night. I used to sleep with socks on my hands, trying to keep the numbness away. My father, Elias Nanook, was an Inuit man through and through. Tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes as sharp as the edge of his hunting knife. He didn't waste words. To him, survival was the only language that mattered. The land is our mother, he told me once as we stood by the frozen river. Me with aching feet from the ice water. Respect it, or it will devour you. At the time, I thought he was just warning me not to fall through the ice. Years later, I understood he meant everything. He taught me to start a fire with a single flint and dry twigs before I could even write my own name. By 6, he had me following moose tracks through the woods, showing me how bent grass and faint prints could tell a whole story. I carried a small axe, my shoulders nearly breaking under its weight, chopping firewood until my palms blistered. I complained once, muttered that other boys at school didn't spend Saturdays freezing in the forest. He fixed me with a gaze so steady it rooted me to the ground. Those boys will freeze to death without a man to follow? You won't, My mother, Kelly, was different. She was warmth where my father was stone. A smile as soft as bread dough, hair like sunlit wheat. She was the one who slipped an extra piece of salmon onto my plate when she thought my father wasn't looking. The one who rubbed my shoulders after I carried logs too big for my small frame. But she backed him, always. He's hard because he wants you strong, she said. The land doesn't forgive weakness. We weren't destitute, but every penny mattered. I remember once sneaking off to the town dump, collecting scrap metal to sell for a couple of dollars so my mother could buy sugar. I felt proud bringing it home, only for my father to shake his head. A man doesn't scavenge, he said. He earns. Still, that night, my mother made hot tea, sweetened with the sugar, and winked at me as if to say, thank you anyway. My classmates called me Forest Boy. They laughed at my patched jacket, at the calluses on my hands. They bragged about Christmas toys while I kept quiet, pretending I didn't care. Maybe I didn't, because every evening, while they watched cartoons, I sat by the fire listening to my father's stories tales of our Inuit ancestors, spirits of the wind and snow, the kind of myths that make your skin prickle because they feel older than truth itself. Those stories were toys too, only heavier, built to last. I carried that childhood like armor. By 9, I could build a shelter out of branches strong enough to outlast a storm. By 12, I could catch salmon barehanded in the shallows. By 14, I could haul firewood that would last a family through the winter. Each lesson was a scar on my palms, a blister on my feet, a layer of frost on my lungs. But it also built something inside me, quiet pride, discipline, the sense that I could face anything. Then Curtis was born. I still remember peering over the crib at this tiny boy with hair as bright as our mother's. I loved him instantly. I wanted to protect him, teach him everything I'd learned. But by the time he could walk, our world had shifted. My father had left the sawmill job for a position with a mining company. They needed someone who knew every ridge and river of Alaska. And my father was a living map. His salary erased debts, filled the cupboards. We moved to Anchorage, into a real house with glass windows that actually sealed out the wind. My mother opened a small diner. Curtis grew up surrounded by warmth and abundance. Where my childhood was carved out of ice and smoke, his was cushioned with toys and soft blankets. I'd watch him toss aside a jacket because it had a scratch, while I still wore boots patched with twine. I tried not to resent it. He was my little brother after all. But the difference between us widened with every season. I was shaped by hunger and cold, by lessons that said, take only what you need, respect what you have. Curtis was shaped by comfort, by the belief that whatever broke would be replaced. By the time he was 10, kids called him the Prince of Anchorage. He basked in it, while I kept my silence. Looking back now, I realized my father tested me against the land, but he gave Curtis everything the land had denied me. Maybe he thought he was balancing the scales. Maybe he thought I didn't need more shaping. But the truth is, those choices planted 2 seeds, discipline in me, entitlement in Curtis. Seeds that would grow into a rivalry neither of us could escape. That's why, when the will was read, it made a cruel kind of sense. Curtis inherited the mansion and the money. I inherited the cabin and the silence. It wasn't random. It was the story of our lives, written one last time by our parents' hands. Curtis never knew the bite of an Alaskan winter the way I did. He grew up in warmth, in a house where the windows sealed tight and the cupboards were full. By the time he was a teenager, he had everything I once dreamed of. New shoes every season, a shiny bicycle, even a television in his room. At school, I was Forest Boy, the kid with calloused hands and a jacket that smelled of smoke. Curtis was the opposite. He started through the halls in fresh sneakers, hair slicked, smile wide. Teachers adored him. Kids followed him. They called him the Prince of Anchorage, and he wore the title like a crown. I tried to see him as just my little brother. I remembered pushing his stroller, tying his shoelaces, carrying him on my shoulders when he was too tired to walk. But the gap between us grew sharper with every year. Curtis loved the city lights, the buzz of restaurants, the noise of crowded bars, the luxury of showing off. He thrived on being seen, on making sure people noticed his watch, his car, his entourage. I, on the other hand, still carried the forest inside me. I found comfort in silence, in chopping wood, in hiking trails that reminded me of my father's lessons. Our parents only deepened the divide. My mother spoiled him, wanting Yang to give him everything I never had. My father, though still stern, softened for Curtis. He's young, he'd say, when Curtis shirked chores. Let him enjoy life. No one ever said that to me. I wasn't jealous, not exactly, but I could see where it was leading. Curtis believed life would always hand him what he wanted, that if something broke, it would be replaced, that he didn't need to work for respect. He just had to flash a smile. The first real fracture between us came one summer afternoon. We were sitting in the kitchen, our mother pulling bread from the oven. I asked Curtis if he wanted to come fishing with me, maybe learn how to track like Dad taught me. He laughed. Why bother, bro? We've got money now. We're not forest people anymore. His words stung more than I let on. I stayed silent, but inside, something cracked. I realized he didn't just reject the forest, he rejected everything that shaped me. By the time Curtis turned 20, he was throwing parties on the balcony of his beachfront apartment. Yes, the one our parents had bought him. I saw photos online, the suits, the champagne, the women in dresses that shimmered under neon lights. He looked untouchable, like the city itself had chosen him as its golden child. And then there was Amber. The girl who once sat across from me in my mother's diner, sipping coffee and reading poetry, started looking at Curtis differently. At first, I told myself I imagined it, but I saw her eyes drift when Curtis walked into a room. I saw the admiration in her smile when he told a story, even one of his shallow bragging tales. Amber used to say she loved me for being different, for not chasing wealth or status. But slowly, she began to compare. "Look at your brother," she said once, her tone casual but sharp. "He knows how to live. He makes people notice." Her words cut deeper than an Alaskan wind. Curtis knew what he was doing. He leaned into it, teasing me with half jokes, inviting Amber to his parties, flaunting his lifestyle like a weapon. I wanted to believe Amber saw through it, that she loved me enough to resist. But deep down, I felt the shift. The cracks in our relationship widened, and Curtis's shadow stretched over everything. By then, my parents' diner was thriving, my mother's laughter filling its corners. Yet even there, I felt Curtis looming. Customers spoke of him with admiration. That boy's going places. Meanwhile, I was still the son in a smoke-scented jacket, cleaning tables, clinging to lessons about Mother Earth that no one seemed to value anymore. It was a cruel balance, Curtis, the prince, basking in light. Me, the forest boy, fading into the background. And then came the day that would tip everything off balance. Day Amber stopped being mine. I met Amber on one of those rare Anchorage afternoons when sunlight poured over the streets like melted gold. She walked into my mother's diner carrying a book of Robert Frost poems, ordered black coffee and toast, and sat by the window like she'd stepped out of another world. I wasn't the type to approach strangers, but something about her drew me in. Maybe it was the way she read, completely absorbed, lips moving slightly with each line. Maybe it was the way she smiled at my mother and called her Aunt Kelly after only 5 minutes. I wiped down a table near hers and asked, "Good book?" She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Pretty good. Frost always reminds me of places I've never been." "I know the places," I said before I could stop myself. "The forest, the wind, the smell of pine after a storm. That's not poetry to me, that's memory." Her eyes lingered on me. "So you're a forest guy?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "You could say that." That was the start. She listened when I talked about chopping wood as a kid, about my father's harsh lessons, about how silence in the forest could feel heavier than any noise in the city. She said I was different, not like the shallow men she met at parties. For the first time, someone looked at me and saw strength, where I only saw scars. We fell hard. I took her camping, taught her to pitch a tent, to listen for animal tracks in the snow. She laughed when she failed to start a fire, smoke choking her eyes, but she kept trying until sparks caught. We lay under stars, and she whispered, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." I believed her. But love is fragile when it meets hunger for more, for bigger, for brighter. Slowly, Amber's admiration turned into comparisons. "Francis," she said once, watching Curtis drive by in his new car, "your brother knows how to make people notice. Don't you ever want that? To live big?" I told her I didn't need big. I needed honest. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carried disappointment. The more Curtis flaunted his lifestyle, the more Amber seemed to lean toward his orbit. At family dinners, her gaze wandered to him. She laughed louder at his jokes than at mine. She began slipping remarks into conversations. "You're too humble, Francis. No one respects quiet. You work hard. But what's the point if you don't show the results?" Curtis doesn't hide his ambition. That's why people admire him. Each sentence was a blade, sharp and precise. I tried to ignore it, tried to remind myself she once loved me for my difference. But I felt her slipping through my hands like water. Then came the night she stopped pretending. We were sitting by the river where I'd once told her about my childhood. She stared at the lights of Anchorage reflected on the water. "You lack ambition," she said quietly. "I need a man who wants more. Look at Curtis. He has money, status. People respect him." I turned to her, my chest tightening. "Amber, respect built on money isn't real." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I can't build a future with someone who chooses small when big is possible." I sat in silence, the river rushing between us like a line I couldn't cross. That was the night I realized love wasn't enough, not when ambition had replaced it. Days later, she slammed the engagement ring onto my mother's diner counter. The same ring I'd saved for, sacrificed for. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Outside, Curtis's car waited. He leaned against the hood, sunglasses reflecting the diner lights, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. I looked at Amber one last time. "So this is about him." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The door closed behind her and the bell chimed. That sound has never left me. I thought losing Amber was the worst pain I'd ever feel. I was wrong. It was a gray winter morning when the phone rang at my mother's diner. The snow outside fell soft, muffling the usual city noise. I was wiping down tables, trying to keep my mind off the fact that Amber was gone and Curtis had her now. The voice on the other end was flat, almost rehearsed. "Are you Francis Nanook? I'm with the Seattle Police Department. I'm sorry to inform you, your parents' plane went down near the Canadian border. Wreckage has been found. There are no survivors." For a moment, the world went silent. My hands still moved with the rag, scrubbing a table that was already clean, as if my body hadn't gotten the message. Then the words hit me like ice water. No survivors. My parents gone. I called Curtis immediately. Music thumped in the background when he picked up. He was at a bar, What did you say? He asked, his voice distracted. I repeated the news. Yeah, okay, he said after a pause. Handle it. I'm busy. He hung up. The following days blurred together. Reporters swarmed Anchorage with headlines screaming, Alaska couple presumed dead in crash. Neighbors dropped off casseroles and loaves of bread, whispering condolences. My father's hunting friends came by, gripping my shoulder with rough hands, saying, he was a good man. My mother's old customers filled the diner, sharing memories of her smile. I nodded, I thanked them, but I felt nothing except a hollow cold. Nights were worse. I dreamed of my father's voice, steady as stone. The land is our mother. Respect it, or it will swallow you. I woke gasping, wishing he'd say it again, just once more. Then came the memorial by the river. We lit candles that flickered in the wind. People shared stories, my mother teaching them to bake, my father guiding them through the woods. When it was my turn, my voice shook. They taught me everything, I said. How to work, how to survive, how to respect the land. That's their legacy Curtis spoke too. He stood tall, said a few polished words about hard work and better lives. His smile was perfect, his eyes empty. The very next day, the lawyer called. Gunnar Holmes, his voice calm but urgent. You and your brother must come in for the will. Curtis was ecstatic. Finally, he said when I told him, something worth looking forward to. I arrived at Gunnar's office early, nerves twisting my stomach. Curtis showed up late, striding in like a man already celebrating. His suit was tailored, his cologne strong. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. We sat. Gunnar adjusted his glasses, pulled out the papers, and began. To our youngest son, Curtis Nanook, we leave the beachfront mansion in Miami, valued at over $1.2 million, along with liquid assets, cash, stocks, bank accounts. Curtis grinned, leaned back, and exhaled like the king he believed he was. Gunnar turned the page. To our eldest son, Francis Nanook, we leave the family cabin near Fairbanks, Alaska. The room fell silent. My heart pounded in my ears. That was it. The cabin, rotting wood, sagging roof, forgotten attic, a childhood relic disguised as an inheritance. Curtis broke the silence with a laugh. Perfect for you, bro. You always were the forest boy. I sat frozen, humiliation burning through me. Mansion versus shack, millions versus dust. It felt like betrayal, like my parents had chosen him over me, even in death. That night, I stared at the engagement ring Amber had left behind. Curtis had the mansion. Curtis had the money. Curtis had her. And all I had was the cabin. But the cabin called to me, not as punishment, as challenge, as TACs. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The drive to Fairbanks felt like moving backward in time. Every mile of icy road pulled me deeper into memories I tried to leave behind. The mountains loomed like silent judges. Pines stretched endlessly, their needles heavy with snow, whispering secrets in a language only my father ever claimed to understand. The truck rattled over frozen ground. The same old Chevy my father once used to haul firewood. The heater barely worked, but I didn't care. The cold felt right. It seeped into my bones, reminding me of the boy who once swung an axe until his hands bled just to keep the fire burning. When the cabin finally came into view, my chest tightened. It looked smaller than I remembered, hunched against the wind like an old man too stubborn to fall. The roof sagged, patches of shingles missing. The walls, gray and splintered, leaned inward as if whispering secrets to each other. The chimney tilted at an angle that made me wonder if one strong gust might topple it. I killed the engine and stepped out. The snow crunched under my boots. For a moment, I just stood there staring. This was my inheritance, my legacy, my punishment, or maybe my test. The door creaked when I pushed it open, hinges screaming like they hadn't moved in years. The air inside was damp, heavy with the smell of rot and dust. Sunlight slanted through cracks in the boards, striping the floor with pale light. Every corner hit me with memories. The attic where I used to sleep, just a cramped space under the roof where frost collected on the beams. The fireplace where my mother knelt, coaxing flames to life. The small table scarred with my father's knife marks, where he once carved my name into the wood like a promise I never understood. I dropped my bag and sat on the floor. The silence was deafening. No Curtis with his laughter, no Amber with her sighs of disappointment. Just me and the ghosts of the past. I tried to imagine my parents choosing this place for me. Why? Did they think I belonged here because I was the one shaped by it? Or had they truly seen me as unworthy of more? That night, I lit a fire in the old hearth. The flames sputtered, then caught, casting flickering shadows across the room. I lay on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wood crackle. For the first time in months, I slept. The next morning, I began to clean. I swept away dust, patched holes in the walls with planks I found stacked outside, wiped down the old table until the knife marks shone again. It wasn't much, but it was something. While fixing a loose floorboard near the hearth, I noticed it sounded hollow. I pried it up with my father's knife and froze. Beneath it was a metal box, rusted at the edges but still intact. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, was a folded map. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded but clear enough. Symbols in the old Inuit script dotted the page, triangles for minerals, droplets for oil, lines for forests rich with timber. At the bottom, in my father's handwriting, were the words, "True value lies not in what you take, but in what you keep." I sat there, staring at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. If this map was real, it meant my cabin inheritance wasn't worthless. It meant my father had left me something greater than money knowledge of land, worth hundreds of millions. For hours, I couldn't move. I imagined selling it. Imagined finally standing taller than Curtis, wiping that smug grin from his face. I imagined Amber coming back, realizing she'd chosen wrong. The temptation was a storm inside me. But then I heard my father's voice again, steady as stone. The land is our mother. Respect it, or it will devour you. Was this map a gift or a test? I tucked it back into the box, locked it in my bag, and sat by the fire until dawn, my thoughts gnawing at me. I didn't know what to do. But I knew one thing. My life was no longer small. Whatever happened next, everything had changed. For days, the map consumed me. I couldn't stop staring at it, tracing the ink lines with trembling fingers. Each mark seemed to whisper promises. Minerals, oil, timber resources worth hundreds of millions if the notes were true. At night, I spread it out on the table by firelight, my father's handwriting glaring up at me. True value lies not in what you take, but in what you keep. Those words tangled me in knots. Was he warning me or daring me? Temptation clawed at me. I imagined walking into Anchorage with the map rolled under my arm, telling Curtis, "You thought you won, but I hold something greater." I imagined Amber's face if she found out I was richer than Curtis could ever dream. The fantasy was sweet, but it rotted in my mouth when I remembered my father's voice. Respect the land, or it will devour you. I told myself I'd keep the secret. That was safer, cleaner. But secrets grow teeth. When the day of the memorial came, I still hadn't decided what the map truly meant. I only knew it weighed on me heavier than the snow outside. The diner was full that evening. Neighbors, family, friends, people who'd eaten my mother's bread or fished alongside my father. Candles flickered on tables. A photo of my parents rested by the counter, framed in pine branches and wildflowers. I spoke first, voice trembling. My parents taught me that value isn't measured in money, but in what we hold close. They lived that truth every day. My words felt small, but they were honest. Others shared stories too. My aunt recalling how my mother baked extra loaves for struggling families. An old hunting buddy laughing about how my father always caught the bigger fish. The room was warm with grief, but also with love. Then Curtis walked in late, as always, Amber at his side. He wore another sleek suit, her hand tucked into his arm. They looked like royalty entering a peasant gathering. When Curtis finally spoke, it was brief. "Mom and Dad worked hard to give us a better life. I'll always be grateful." He sat down quickly, eyes already scanning for reactions. Amber clapped softly, her gaze sliding toward me with a smirk that felt like salt rubbed into my wounds. Their presence burned in me. My grief, my anger, my humiliation all tangled into one sharp edge. And then, like a fool, I let the storm break. I shot to my feet, heart pounding. "You think I'm nothing, don't you? Just a failure with a rotten cabin?" The room fell silent, dozens of eyes turned toward me. My voice shook, but I couldn't stop. "Well, I found something. In that cabin. A map showing resources worth $500 million. The words spilled out before I could shove them back down. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the blood drain from my face. Curtis's expression shifted from shock to greed in a single breath. His lips curled into a grin. "500 million, you say?" he whispered. But the hunger in his eyes said more than words ever could. Amber leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "A treasure map?" she mocked, her voice sharp. "Sounds like something out of a children's book." Francis, always chasing fantasies I couldn't answer. My throat locked up. The whispers in the room grew louder, curiosity, disbelief, greed. I'd just revealed the biggest secret of my life in front of a crowd. I left before anyone could stop me. The door slammed behind me, the cold night air biting harder than ever. Snow stung my face, but I barely felt it. I knew the moment the words left my mouth, I had made a mistake. The secret was no longer mine, and Curtis would never let it go. I barely slept after that night at the diner. My own words echoed in my skull like a curse. 500 million. I had handed Curtis the spark, and I knew he would set fire to everything. By morning, it began. A letter slid under my apartment door, thick with the scent of fresh ink and expensive stationery. It was from a law firm downtown. Curtis is doing, of course. "Francis Nanook is hereby accused of concealing family inheritance assets. The alleged item A map indicating mineral, oil, and timber deposits is considered part of the Nanook estate. Failure to disclose constitutes fraud. Fraud." My own brother had turned me into a criminal on paper, and he didn't stop there. Curtis moved fast, spreading rumors like wildfire. At parties, he played the victim, telling Anchorage's elite that I'd hidden a fortune from the family. "It's not about money," he told them with a wounded sigh. "It's about loyalty." Francis betrayed our parents' legacy. Soon everyone in the city had heard about Francis's treasure map. Old friends called me, their voices oily with fake concern. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly appeared, hinting at family unity while pressing for details. Even strangers started showing up at the diner, pretending to order coffee while fishing for answers. Uncle Carl, a man I'd only seen at funerals, phoned me one evening. "Francis, buddy, you know family's gotta stick together. If you've got something valuable, share it. Don't be greedy." His tone was sweet, but underneath was threat. "You don't want the whole clan turning their backs on you." Reporters joined the feeding frenzy. One morning, I opened the local paper to see my face under the headline, Selfish Son Hoards $500 million treasure. Cameras camped outside my building, microphones shoved at my mouth. Francis, what will you do with the money? Are you hiding resources from your brother? From your community? I wanted to scream that it wasn't about money, that I never planned to take anything. But the words dried in my throat. No one wanted the truth. They wanted a spectacle. The worst blow came when I drove back to Fairbanks to check on the cabin, my sanctuary, my father's legacy. I found the fence smashed, windows broken, and the yard riddled with holes where scavengers had dug like desperate animals. The cabin had always been fragile, but sacred. Now it was desecrated, turned into a crime scene by greed. I dropped to my knees in the snow, staring at the wreckage. The silence of the forest felt heavier than ever, as if even Mother Earth grieved with me. Then Amber came back. Of course she did. She showed up at my apartment wearing a fur coat, perfume thick in the air. Her smile was soft, practiced. Francis, she whispered, I was wrong. You're not a failure. We could be something again together. With that map, we could build a life. For a moment, I almost believed her. Then I saw it, the same hunger in her eyes that lived in Curtis's. Not love, not regret, just greed. Get out, I said, my voice shaking with cold rage. I don't need you. Not now. Not ever. Her smile cracked, but she didn't argue. She left in silence, her heels clicking down the hallway like nails in a coffin. I thought the pressure might break me. Lawsuits, rumors, relatives turning into vultures, Amber crawling back like a ghost of betrayal. But worse was still coming, because Curtis didn't just want the map. He wanted to destroy me. The day of the hearing arrived with a sky the color of slate. Snow drifted lazily, but inside me, a storm raged. I walked up the courthouse steps feeling like an animal being led into a cage. Inside, the room buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors, relatives, even reporters filled the benches. Everyone wanted a front row seat to my humiliation. Curtis sat across the aisle, slick in a tailored suit, his lawyer beside him. Amber was there too, draped in a crimson dress, her hand wrapped possessively around Curtis's arm like a trophy. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. His gavel struck wood with a sharp crack. Court is in session. Curtis's lawyer spoke first. His voice was sharp, rehearsed. Your Honor, my client's brother, Francis Nanook, has concealed an inheritance asset, a map worth an estimated $500 million. He has attempted to monopolize the family legacy, betraying both his brother and the values their parents instilled. Every word stabbed at me. Betrayal, fraud, greed. I wanted to shout the truth that I'd never planned to sell the land, never wanted riches. But my own court-appointed lawyer whispered, Stay calm, I'll handle it. So I sat there, fist clenched, watching Curtis smirk, like victory was already his. The judge turned to me. Mr. Nanook, do you deny possession of this map? I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a groan. A gust of cold air swept through, carrying whispers. Heads turned, and there they were, my parents, alive. My father, tall and broad, his black hair streaked with silver, but his eyes still sharp as the edge of a blade. My mother, golden hair touched with gray, her gaze steady, but full of something harder than warmth. The courtroom gasped. Someone muttered, Ghosts! Amber's hand slipped from Curtis's arm. His smug smile collapsed, replaced by a pallor like he'd seen a phantom. My father's voice cut through the stunned silence. We are not dead, and we have something to say. The judge's gavel pounded. Order! Order! But even he couldn't hide his astonishment. Mr. and Mrs. Nanook, please. Explain yourselves. My parents walked to the front, hand in hand. My father's voice carried the weight of stone and storm. The crash, the will, the map, all of it was a test. We needed to see which of our sons understood true value. Not wealth, not property, but respect for what cannot be replaced. He turned his gaze on Curtis. You failed, son. You let greed guide you. You sued your brother. You spread poison. You treated money as everything. Curtis's lips trembled. Dad, I thought... But my father silenced him with a look. Then he faced me. His eyes softened. And you, Francis. You held the secret. You remember my words. True value lies not in what you take, but in what you keep. You honored that, even when temptation gnawed at you. My throat burned. I wanted to speak, but no words came. The lawyer Gunnar Holmes stood. The will presented before was fabricated at Mr. and Mrs. Nanook's request. The Miami mansion, the assets, they remain in their control. The cabin was always intended as the true inheritance, a test of character. Curtis slumped back in his chair, pale and defeated. Amber's eyes darted, desperate, searching for a lifeline. She even turned toward me, her lips parting. Francis, maybe we can... No, I said, my voice cold. You chose your side. Her face crumpled. The judge cleared his throat, still shaken. Given this revelation, the case is dismissed. He banged the gavel once, but the sound was drowned by the whispers flooding the courtroom. My mother came to me, tears shining as she pulled me into her arms. You made us proud, Francis. More than you'll ever know. For the first time in months, I felt something warm. Not just relief, but belonging. But even in that moment, as Curtis wept silently and Amber stared hollow-eyed at the floor, I knew one truth. The test wasn't over. Because character is not proven once. It's proven every day. That night, back at the cabin, the air felt different, warmer somehow, though the snow still fell heavy outside. My parents sat with me by the old fireplace, the flames painting their faces in flickering light. For months, I had grieved them, cursed them, thought them gone forever. Now they were here, alive, flesh and blood, and yet, the weight of their test still pressed on me. My father leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the fire. Francis, we never meant to break you. But we needed to know which son carried our values. Not our wealth, not our property, but our soul. I swallowed hard. Why like this? Why vanish? Why leave me to believe you were dead? He sighed, voice rough as gravel. Because temptation reveals truth. We couldn't hand over our legacy blindly. Curtis was spoiled. You were hardened by struggle. We needed to see who would honor what matters. Beside him, my mother took my hand. Her palm was warm, her touch steady. I knew it would hurt you, she said softly, tears shining in her eyes. Every night, I prayed you wouldn't lose yourself in grief. But I believed in you. You've always had the heart of this land, Francis. Honest, strong, unyielding. I lowered my head. I almost failed. I almost let greed in. At the memorial, I blurted it out. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My father looked at me, his gaze sharp but not condemning. And yet, you didn't sell it. You didn't exploit it. You didn't betray the land. Stumbling is human. Standing back up, that is what matters. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with patterns I recognized from our Inuit heritage. He placed it on the table between us. This, he said, is the real map. My hand shook as I opened the box. Inside lay a sheet of animal hide, its markings painstakingly drawn lines, symbols, coordinates. It wasn't paper scrawled with fading ink. It was alive, detailed, deliberate. The fake map was bait, my father explained, to see if greed would guide you. But this is truth. It shows the places our ancestors preserved. Riches, yes, but also warnings. Some lands are sacred, never to be touched. Some must remain untouched, or they lose their spirit forever. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. Here it was, the thing people had mocked me for, sued me over, tried to steal. Real, tangible. And now, it was mine to decide. Why me? I whispered. Because you respect what Curtis never could, my father said simply. Because you know that true value isn't taken, it's kept. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of firewood. I thought of Curtis sobbing in the courtroom, stripped of pride. I thought of Amber, hollow-eyed as her schemes crumbled. I thought of all the relatives who circled like vultures, of reporters shouting for sound bites, of strangers digging into the land that raised me. I looked at the map again. For a heartbeat, I imagined selling it, cashing in, becoming untouchable. I could crush Curtis, buy everything Amber ever wanted, live larger than anyone in Anchorage. But then I heard my father's words, echoing like they had my whole life. The land is our mother. Respect it, or it will devour you. I closed the box, placed it gently back on the table, and pushed it toward him. I won't exploit it, I said firmly. Not now, not ever. I'll guard it. I'll keep it safe. That's the only way to honor you and her. My mother's tears spilled over as she cupped my face in her hands. You've made the choice we always hoped you would. My father nodded, pride glinting in his eyes. Then the legacy is yours, Francis. Not just the map, the responsibility, the burden, the honor. The fire popped, sending a spray of sparks upward. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel broken or abandoned. It felt alive again. Whole. I sat back, breathing deeply, the weight in my chest easing. I didn't need millions. I didn't need mansions or approval or revenge. I had something greater. I had the truth. And for the first time in my life, it felt like enough. The weeks that followed felt like waking from a long, brutal winter. Not because the snow stopped falling, it didn't, but because the heaviness in my chest had lifted. The city was still buzzing with rumors. Some claimed the courtroom reveal had been staged. Others whispered that my parents were eccentric tricksters. And Curtis, well, he disappeared from Anchorage society almost overnight. No more flashy parties, no more tailored suits. My parents had given him a choice. Live a year in the forest, stripped of luxury, or walk away from the family legacy forever. He went north. I don't know if he'll last. Maybe he'll come back humbled, maybe broken. Either way, it's not my burden anymore. Amber tried once more to reach me, this time with a letter. Neat handwriting, a page soaked in perfume. She wrote about regret, about second chances, about how she missed the man who used to love her no matter what. I didn't finish reading. I burned it in the fireplace, watching the smoke curl upward until it vanished. She had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. The relatives, the vultures, they circled for a while. Calls, messages, thinly veiled threats about family responsibility. I ignored them all. Eventually, they grew tired, their greed chasing some other rumor. And me? I stayed at the cabin. At first, just to mend the place, replacing the broken windows, fixing the roof, rebuilding the fence. Each repair felt like stitching a wound, turning decay into strength again. But then I realized something. I wasn't just fixing wood and stone, I was fixing myself. At night, by the fire, my parents would sit with me, telling old stories. Not about money or inheritance, but about resilience. About the land. About how true wealth isn't measured in numbers, but in the quiet moments when you can breathe and know you're free. One evening, as the aurora rippled across the sky in sheets of green and violet, my father placed his hand on my shoulder. You've proven yourself, Francis. Not to us, to yourself. And he was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost, by Curtis's shadow, by Amber's betrayal. I was defined by what I chose to keep: my integrity, my respect for the land, my own damn peace. Ask yourself, what would you do if you held a secret that could make you rich beyond measure, but only at the cost of your soul? Would you take it, or would you let it go? And in doing so, finally set yourself free? As for me, I chose freedom. Thanks for staying with me through this wild journey. If the story gripped you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next full story. And tell me in the comments, would you keep the secret or cash in on it?